we can talk about the selection. Let's talk about the brush. This is the paintbrush. I call it paintbrush. I think they call it actually the brush tool. So, just watch out for that when I do that. But so they call it the brush tool, but I call it paintbrush sometimes. I think it looks like a paintbrush. I don't know if icons really mean anything to you, but it looks a lot like a paintbrush. Sometimes when you hold over that, it gives you some information of what's going on, with the tool. It's sometimes nice. You can go to learn how and stuff like that if you want to kind of get in there. But let's take a look at our tools. So in Photoshop, at the top here, let me zoom out so you can see a relationship to everything. At the top, whenever you click on a tool, you're going to notice that underneath your menu items, you're going to get tool settings. So I'm just going to start clicking on the different tools, and just notice how this just changes as I click on different tools. Do you see how that's updating? And it's so depending on what tool I'm selecting, I'm getting different settings for each tool. Go back to my paintbrush tool. And let's zoom in a little bit and take a look. Let's put this at 100, because this is, I think, default what you would see. Probably not a giant brush like that. Let's just click on the hard round. Go to the size here. I don't know what you're actually seeing here, but what I think by default, you usually start off with something like this, a hard round brush. You could be on a soft round, that's okay. It's not really too big a deal, but we do want to use a round brush. So if you're not seeing these settings, we want to have a round brush. Notice that the roundness or the hardness is the soft and the hard is related right here. Okay, so the first two settings that you really want to think about with a brush is going to be your size and your hardness. Okay, so looking down here, this is two examples. This is a hard round brush and a soft round brush, and the main difference is the edge, right? So notice how the edge is soft or blurry on a soft round, and on a hard round, it's going to be really distinct, like a real contrast on the edge, so a sharp edge. They're both round, though. So it's basically a circle, okay? That's the big difference between soft and hard. And you'll see me wanting two different types of brushes. So when I'm making a real crisp line, I'm going to want a hard round. When I'm making shadows or shading, I'm probably going to use a lot of soft round, at least at this level of painting or this technique of painting. Depending on what you're doing, you might change that. Of course, there's a lot of different brushes to choose from, and you can see that there's all kinds of, stiff bristles and flat curves, and there's all manner of shapes and variations of brushes, and you can really get lost in these for a long time. So let's not even touch those for now. Let's just only look at our soft and our hard round, which are really surprisingly extremely versatile, and you find yourself sometimes really it's all you need really for majority of your work would be just a round brush. So let me zoom out a little bit more so then we can come back up. So size and hardness. So I can actually control these. I can have start with a soft round, and I can make the round, I can make it hardness so that it's change the hardness. So I started off, you can see this is a representation of the brush. You can see that I can make it hard or soft. And then in terms of size, sizing is by pixel. That's, the pixels are, it's a difficult number to work with, not getting too into that when you made your image. You chose 300 pixels per inch, so if I were to set this at 300, that would represent a 1-inch circle. So if I come out here, you can see that is a 1-inch circle. Don't worry about the math here. But you can see that that's a little bit difficult, and that's related to specifically to whatever image I chose. So resolution and pixel size and stuff like that, there's a lot to learn about that. It's actually really challenging to understand, and People get pretty lost on that stuff, but it just takes time. But the biggest problem with it is it's all relative. So you're going to find yourself struggling until you really get a strong understanding of the relativeness of things and how that really works and how it relates. So try not to get too caught up in the numbers here for sizes. Try to use just your intuition about what you want to do. One thing that you'll notice is I'm going to be using a lot of really large brushes. Like 300 is actually kind of small in my opinion for this type of work. Probably be 400, 500, I don't know, we'll see. But to begin with, let's make a little small one because I want to make a little line. I'm going to make some little lines here. So I'm going to do something like 9 pixels and I'm going to make it nice and sharp. Okay. Coming across the top, some other settings, but we won't touch them quite yet, but you'll see that there's opacity and flow. 2 really useful settings here. Depending on what we're doing, we would change either of these, and I'll show you the differences in a little bit. Then of course there's some smoothing, which is useful for smoothing out lines, and it's one of the beauties of this type of technology. But we're not going to get into smoothing very much. It's got some options here. I'm not going to even worry about that. It's got some other stuff here for always use pressure for size. Some symmetry stuff. Like I'm not even going to worry about those things either. You also have a normal mode, which again, we're not going to get into that either because it's really going to require that you understand a lot about how layers work with each other and how transparencies work with each other, and we aren't really doing that for this project. So again, there's some things that I'm going to point out, but we're not going to use. Right now, the main things we're going to use are going to be size and hardness, and opacity and flow. These are our big ones, and you'll find that those are probably the biggest ones you're going to work with. But as you get more advanced, you might start to use some more settings here, especially here, and of course the some of the pens like for tablets and stuff, which are really cool and useful. I didn't click on this one right here, and you can see that there's some tool presets that I don't actually have any loaded currently, so there's nothing set to be in here at the moment, so there's nothing really to click there. So just notice that. And then lastly is going to be this tab right here, which is going to be this folder of brushes. And really, if you click on that, it's actually going to open up a little dialog box right here to the side. And you'll see that it just gives you some of the same settings, but really way more advanced. And we're going to tackle this in our next video, really taking advantage of all these settings and really building custom brushes to take advantage of all the different types of settings brushes have. But let's focus on our basics to begin with. So like I said, I made a brush. It's 9 pixels. It's not important that it's exactly 9, somewhere near there. And our hardness is 100%, so it's going to be a super hard brush. Okay, so notice that soft is selected, but it's actually a hard brush because I'm using the settings to do that. So I'm just going to click and I'm going to drag, and I'm going to just do something like that. Okay, just a squiggle, and then I'm going to do Command Z or Control Z to undo. And I'll do it one more time, and then Command Z or Control Z to undo. Now that's an undo, and that can be useful. Okay, but let's just do another squiggle, and then I'm going to show you the selection tool. Okay, so that's paintbrush. Let's talk about selections real quick. The marquee selection tool. You'll see that there's actually an elliptical and a marquee, and we're going to use both of these today. So this is the rectangular marquee selection tool, and the way this works is you just click and you drag, and you get these called marching ants, these little dashes that are sort of walking around this shape. Okay, and if I click away, it just goes away. So click and drag, click away, click and drag, click away, click and drag, or I can just click and drag, and I can just make new boxes. Now, what am I doing? I'm making what's called a selection. So if I select over my squiggly, what I'm basically saying is anything that's within this boundary, do something. Okay, that's what a selection does. It's basically saying anything within this area, do something. Okay, so I'm going to make that selection over. Well, let's do half of it. Let's do half of it. Okay, just as long as half of your, or roughly half of your squiggle is in there, and then you use the delete key. So it's just the delete. Okay, just on your keyboard it says delete, or sometimes I guess it might say backspace. Throws people off there. So it's on my keyboard. I'm just going to press that. I'm going to tap it once. And it just deletes whatever is inside of this boundary is going to delete. So I'll do another little section here and do it again. And then I'll just delete the whole thing. Click away and the selection goes away. If I drag out again, I can make another selection. So now let's do the opposite. So that was making a painting, selecting a portion or portions, and deleting. Now I'm going to make a selection, and I'm going to use my paintbrush. I'm going to come back to my paintbrush. Okay, and then I'm going to click, and I'm just going to, outside the boundary, you notice if I click and I drag, nothing happens. But as I come into the boundary, it paints. And as I leave, it doesn't paint. So again, anytime I'm inside of the this selected area, something will happen. But as I'm outside of that area, nothing happens. So I haven't actually let go of my mouse. I've clicked once and I'm just dragging, right? So that was the first time I let go of my click right there. So anywhere I drag outside of that area, no painting. Once I go in there, though, it's going to paint. Okay. We use the selections to help us really control where the pixels are going to be affected, how the pixels are affected on the screen, where the color actually goes on the screen. This is really useful, and you'll notice right off the bat, you'll notice a lot of people painting this way. Sometimes they don't really describe that they're doing it, but they're doing it a lot, and for multiple different reasons. But it's really a great way to define a region and then work with your paintbrush. Okay, so let's go ahead and delete this. Going to deselect again. So just sticking with our tools that we know, I can click on that selection tool again and then click away. So notice now I'm going between these two. I'm going marquee selection tool, paintbrush, right? I'm kind of, when I need to do selection stuff, I'm clicking on this. When I want to do painting stuff, I'm clicking on this. So I'm going between these two now. There's other ways to deselect and stuff, and we'll get to that. But right now, just because you know where that is, it's a good way to do it. Just click on that marquee selection tool and click away. Okay? Let's look at our brush now again. So we did the squiggly. I'll just click one more time and make a freeform line. Command Z to undo, Control Z to undo. Now hold the Shift key down. So holding the Shift key down, I can click and drag. And notice that it goes in a straight line. Notice if I just holding the Shift key down as I click and I drag, I only get straight lines. Now it kind of does these sort of weird diagonals at times, and it's kind of cool though. We can get really straight lines this way. I'm just not even letting go of the Shift key, and you'll see these weird diagonals, and we'll not worry about those diagonals for now. But you can see that it's pretty great way to make straight lines. That's the Shift key. So holding Shift, click, and drag, and you can get nice straight lines. Okay, let's go to our marquee selection tool. And now outside of the whole box, I'm just going to click and drag over the entire window like that. You see that? I went over everything. Can you see that whole thing going? I'm clicking and dragging over the entire thing, and then hit delete or backspace. Just clear it out. So the marquee selecting tool is really useful, right? We use it. We can use it as a way to clear out a space. We can delete things. We can add things. It's not our only way to do this, but it's a good tool to get used to, and you really want to start thinking in terms of selections. This is one of our biggest tools for all manner of stuff. All of these tools right here are actually selective type tools, and we take advantage of them for all manner of different reasons. And we'll always be working on and trying to refine how we create selections. So I want you guys right off the bat thinking about selections and trying to make them part of your process. I would say it's probably one of the biggest parts of the whole entire Photoshop or any of this type of work is selections. Definitely relates to a lot of different classes as well. Okay, so I have a clean space now. So remember, if you didn't get that, you could always do that in sections. So if you have a piece like that, you could take out a part with the selection tool and delete it. Hold on. I hit return instead of delete. You can just do that in pieces and just keep selecting until everything's gone. Okay. And then we're going to make sure we deselect. So I'm going to just make sure I'm in my marquee tool, and I'm going to click so nothing's selected. This is real common. So if you find yourself sort of like I'm going to make a really small selection there. I don't know if you can see that, but there's this little tiny selection. It's very small. Barely see the marching ants. Okay. And then if I go and grab my paint tool and I try to paint, nothing happens because there's a selection error. And if I go real closely to that one little dot, you can see that dot will fill. But that's the only place I can paint right there. And so sometimes you'll be trying to paint and it won't paint because you have a selection there. So just watch out for that. Make sure you get that marquee tool and just click anywhere and deselect, and it'll go away. Since we're getting there, maybe it's good just to point out that at the top there of your menu there is a select tab, and you can see that there's a select all or a deselect. So if you did have just a really small little selection, you're going to see that deselect is available, and you could just click on that as well and it'll deselect everything. If it is grayed out, there's nothing selected. Okay, so let's get our paintbrush and let's do some straight lines. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hold shift, I'm going to click, I'm going to drag across like that. And I'm going to hold shift, I'm going to click and drag across. And what you notice is you get these diagonals. And the way that this works is that I'll do one up here. You see it'll go diagonal from here because this is where I last just clicked. And so when I hold shift and I click, see that? It's going to make those diagonals. Let's marquee select everything and delete it. And then we'll just click anywhere and deselect that. Go back to our brush. So do this one more time. But this time I'm going to just hold shift, I'm going to click, I'm going to drag across, and then I'm going to click just anywhere out in this gray area. I'm just going to click somewhere like, say, there. And then I'm going to hold shift, and I'm going to click again. Make it 2 lines. So you don't get that diagonal issue. So again, if I hold shift and I do that again, you get that diagonal thing. Now if you end up with a diagonal, you just cannot figure out how to get that to happen. It's not going to be a big deal, but it's nice to be able to control this. Marquee selection tool, select everything, delete. Again, this whole selecting with the marquee selection tool, there's a lot of better ways to do this maybe, but this is the tool that we're really trying to practice. So I want you guys to really practice this and get used to it. And now I do have that selection, so be careful. This whole thing's selected, so I'm just going to deselect by clicking. So let's talk a little bit about what we're making. I'm going to just grab my paintbrush tool, and